Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the big one. The highly requested, highly sought after inventory. So this is going to take, I'm predicting, about 5 episodes. This is a big one. There's so many elements that go into making this work. We're going to be jumping around all over the place. I'm going to try and explain everything as we go through it, and hopefully it will make perfect sense by the time we get to the end. So we're going to need a base item. We're going to need a working inventory, a place to store it on our persons, and we're going to need a menu that can read that inventory. Before we do any of that, we're going to need a structure. So down here in structures, let's right click, go to blueprints, come down to structure, and call this s_inventory. The structure is going to handle 4 things. The first is an actor. This is going to be an object reference, and we're going to call this item. Next up, we're going to create another variable. It's going to be called name, and it's going to be a text value. Another variable, this one's going to be image, and it's going to be texture 2D. And finally, we're going to add amount, which is going to be an integer. Like so. So let's save that and pop out of there. Next up, come down to user interface and right click anywhere and create another user interface, a widget blueprint. This is going to be utility_inventory slot, and then pop into the inventory slot. So this isn't going to be our actual inventory. Our inventory menu is going to be made up of these inventory slots inside. So get rid of the canvas panel because we're not going to need that. These items are going to be shaped inside of the actual inventory menu. And let's grab a button and drag that down to our inventory slot. Next up, let's grab an overlay and put that on top of the button. And then with this overlay, let's grab an image to sit on top of the overlay. Set the overlay to these 2 horizontal and vertical alignments on the fill side, and set the image to the same so that it covers the entire screen. And then on top of that, we're going to get some text. And that text is going to sit in the overlay as well. We will change this to a random number like 10 so we can see how it's going to look. Next up, let's create some bindings. Let's go to image and create a binding here. Let's call it get image. We'll create a variable. That variable we'll call pick up image. And from the drop down, we'll make it a texture 2D. Object reference. And we'll drag that in. Now we'll drag off of this and go make brush from texture. And then plug that in there. So this just converts it to a brush. Now next up, we're going to go back to the designer and click on the text box and create a binding for that text. We're going to call this amount, and it's going to be an integer. Then we're going to drag in amount and plug that in here. Get amount is what we'll call the function, and we're going to leave that there for now. So let's compile and save that. We will come back to this. Now I've got this set up so we can actually go and start creating the menu. So let's right click, go to user interface, widget blueprint, and call this menu_inventory. This is the big daddy. This is the inventory menu that will determine everything. First up, let's go and grab ourselves one of these borders because we don't want to have to recreate all of this formatting. What we would prefer to do is just delete what we don't need. So let's set this border over to the middle. And then we can get rid of some of these buttons. We'll keep the back button. Let's get rid of the no button, the yes button. We can get rid of this horizontal box. And instead of that text saying quit, we'll change it to inventory. And remember not to get rid of your title and closing brackets at the end, because remember this is hooked up to our standard text style, so we can change the font for everything all at once when we want to play with some fonts. We also won't need this text here. So this is pretty much all we need at the moment, except we're going to need something to house all of our inventory slots in. Come over to panel and come down to uniform grid panel and drag that on top of our canvas panel. Let's center the alignment. Anchor it to the center as well. Set our positions to 0 and 0 because it's been anchored by the alignment in the middle. And then we will add our inventory slots to this grid here. So come over to user created, inventory slot, and drag an inventory slot on top of the grid panel. And you can see there that it's already started to fill. Now let's copy that inventory slot and paste it again, and keep pasting it until we get to 24. Remembering that because we're dealing with an array here, we start counting from 0. So 0 is technically 1, 1 is technically 2. And that's the way the array will look at it, so that's the better way for us to look at it. Next up, when we click on these items now, we can see that instead of just a horizontal and vertical alignment, we have rows and columns. These are referring to the uniform grid slot. So the first one should be 0 and 0, because again, we're counting from 0. And then if we make the next one 1 on the column, you can see it's moved over. 2 will be 2. 3 will be 3. And 4 will be 4. And they're all squished there together because we need to go back over to our uniform grid panel and size to content for now, so that it will build up as we go. And then later on, we'll expand the grid so that it's as big as we want to fill this page. So now that we have 5 rows at the top, I'm going to make a grid of 5 by 5. Now with inventory slot 5, I want to go row 1. So I'll grab the next 5, scrolling down to layout, which is now moved down here. I'll make these row 1. Coming down here to the next 5. Again, we have to count from the 0, so 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Down here on row, make that row 2. 15 to 19 be row 3. And 20 to 24 will be row 4. So now we don't have to set the row. All we have to do is set the columns, which are now back up here if we do them individually. You could select them as you wanted. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Those are already going to be row 0 or column 0, so we don't need to worry about them. But the next one down, 6, 11, 16, and 21 would be column 1. Now, you could do it that way, but I am going to double check them anyway when I go through them to make sure they're counting in increments, because if this gets messed up, your inventory is messed up. So 7 should be column 1, row 2. 8, row 1, column 3. 9, row 1, column 4. Slot 10 should be row 2, column 0. 11 should be row 2, column 1. Row 2, column 2. 13, row 2, column 3. 14, row 2, column 4. And I'll let you guys take out the last 2 rows yourself. So when you go down here in your uniform grid panel and you press down, the rows should be jumping down like this. just gradually moving down like that, and we know all of these are now in the right position. Now that we have them all aligned, let's go and size them out. Let's make it, oh, I don't know, let's see what 500 looks like. And then grab all of the inventory slots and set their alignment to fill on both axes. So if you wanted to make your inventory even bigger, all you'd do is add more inventory slots here. But for now, let's start simple and get this working. And then just to finish this off, because we're only just getting started, let's go over to our user interface. Let's come to our menu_game, because as I said, we were going to take care of this later on. We have our inventory there. So come over to the event graph. And down here, where it says inventory, we want to copy over that script so that the inventory menu pops up. The script I'm talking about is, of course, the same script that you'll see in the pause menu, where when we're switching to another menu, such as the quit menu here, because this is the only other menu we're switching to, this is the script we want. So let's quickly do that, and then we'll wrap up for this episode. So on top of inventory, get player controller. Don't know why my caps lock is on, but okay, we'll shout it. Create widget. Menu inventory, reference to self. Get class. And here we'll need to go and create our first variable inside the actual inventory menu. Come over to the graph, hit a variable. We're going to call this previous menu. It's going to be user widget class. Compile and save that. And then from here, let's set previous menu. This is how we get back to this menu when the time comes. Attach that over there. And then finally add to viewport and remove from parent right there. And then over in the inventory menu itself, we'll go over to our back button, scroll down, make sure we actually have the button selected and not the rich text block on top. Scroll down to onClicked, and we reverse that script. Get player controller, create widget. We want previous menu as we did here. Then add to viewport. And remove from parent. And now, if we were to save everything, making sure that we compile and save for the menus we've edited, if we go play, press I, using the keys as if it was a gamepad, I can select inventory, and I will have to use the actual mouse to get to the back button because we haven't set up hovering over our items. So that's the very, very beginning of this inventory. We still got a long way to go, so stick around and I'll see you guys next week.